Welcome, you guys, to the Seed Storyteller series. We are so glad that you are with us today. And my friends, you are in for a treat. I'm talking today with Laura Parker, and she is going to share with us her story, her heartbeat, her passion to fight against human trafficking, to fight for freedom and justice for all. Laura is co-founder of the Exodus Road, and the Exodus Road is an organization that specializes in human trafficking rescue. And their investigators gather evidence and help find and free those who have been enslaved around the world. To date, they have fueled the rescue of nearly 1,500 survivors of human trafficking and 800 traffickers. So this work is tangible. It's going on right here and right now. It is so important. And we're going to talk about what they're doing. And for those that don't know about human trafficking, why this is so important. But before we get to that, I want to just tell you there is a write-up that is full of resources and ways that you can learn about what's going on in the world, what's going on where you live. And I and Laura really believe that it will help to fuel your own story, your own calling, your own ways to join, to stand up and love big and fight for freedom and justice. So I want to dive in because we could talk for hours about this, but this will last about 45 minutes. So Laura, I would love, thank you again for joining us.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to be here.
I would love if you would you kind of give us a big picture? What is human trafficking and what's happening in the world right now when it comes to human trafficking?
Yeah, so human trafficking is an issue an issue in our world today that has a lot of misinformation around it. A lot of people think it's something that just happens overseas. A lot of people think it just happens in the sex industry with sex trafficking. And so there's a lot of misinformation about it. But the reality is that recent estimates are that there are about 40 million people that are affected in some form of modern slavery or human trafficking today. And that looks like labor trafficking or forced labor. It can look like forced marriage, and it can look like sex trafficking. So it affects men and women. Definitely in the sex trafficking industry, it's more women. And then in the forced labor, it's more men. But yeah, it's a significant problem. It happens in the United States as well. I think a lot of people think, oh, it only happens in foreign countries.
Right.
But yeah, it does happen in the United States as well, in both forced labor, actually all three: forced labor, sex trafficking, and forced marriages also happen here in the US.
Wow, thank you. Well, tell us about what the Exodus Road is up to and why you guys are so passionate about doing what you do.
Yeah, we didn't set out. My husband and I are the founders of the organization, and we did not set out to attack this problem. It really was something that was in front of us on our path, and it was that thing that we kept trying to talk ourselves out of and kept ruminating on. And it was really the thing that that we just couldn't let go of. And so we were actually in Thailand. We were doing different humanitarian work, and my husband started to serve on a kind of a research committee about human trafficking. And we just learned a lot in about a year, over the course of about a year, and talking with other practitioners there in Thailand about what was needed and what the gaps were, and just learned a lot about how much was not being done and how big the problem really was. And eventually, it's a long story that we don't have time to get into, but eventually he started doing undercover work with the police. And that led us into this journey of really trying to practically solve the problem of how do we help those currently enslaved? How do we come alongside local police and equip them to gather investigations for successful rescue missions, and then also have enough evidence that we can convict traffickers with their laws, so that so we're making trafficking more dangerous in a systematic way. So yeah, and it's been such a journey. We started really organically. Again, it just kind of was in front of us. And I think the thing we couldn't get away from the why was really we kept looking at our own kids. And every time we would hit an obstacle, we kept thinking, if this were Kelty, that's our oldest, if this were Kelty, if this were Cade, if this were Ava, would we not want someone to figure this out and not quit? And
Yeah.
we could never say no to that answer. And because we could never say no to that answer, we just kept plugging forward. And it's been a decade now of the work. So
That's amazing. Tell us what countries y'all focus your work in most
yeah,
right now.
yeah, we have a headquarters office in the U.S.
Yep.
and we do education and awareness here. But then our primary focus is in India, Thailand, Latin America. We're moving into Brazil, and then with our training platform, and then we are launching into the Philippines by the end of this year.
Wow. Wow. And tell me, I love this quote from your man, Matt.
Yeah.
Justice is in the hands of the ordinary. Tell us kind of what he means by that and um, how that really invites all of us really to join and be a part.
Yes, totally. Yeah, I think the interesting thing about our story is that we were not like Liam Neeson. My husband doesn't have any military background.
Mhm.
I was a church kid from North Carolina, married my high school sweetheart, and a stay-at-home mom when
Yeah.
all of this started. And so the fact that this journey has taken us into these places where he's going into the darkest of places, gathering evidence, wearing body worn cameras.
Mhm.
If it, I think we were very, very aware
Mm.
of our vulnerability and our ordinariness, and the
Yeah.
fact that from outward standards, it didn't look like we had really anything to offer. And in fact, we had one lady early on tell us when we were telling them about what we were doing, and she said, "What do you have to bring to the table, really?" And I think that's the attitude that a lot of us feel, especially when we try to look at a problem like human trafficking, which feels so complex, so big, so dark. We think, what can we really bring to the table? And so that phrase, justice is in the hands of the ordinary, I think speaks to that. It speaks to that we all have actually, the truth is that we all have something to bring to the table. And it's about bringing that and showing up and seeing what happens with it. So yeah, that's become a mantra around here, and it's what we tell ourselves when we get into the mindset that we're not good enough, we don't know enough, we don't have it all figured out yet. And it helps us not to use that as an excuse to not do anything.
Yeah. Well, so with that kind of call to all of us
Mhm.
to learn and to do what we can to rise up and stand tall and um, fight against this injustice. Could you, what are some things that in this decade of work um, you have watched ordinary people like you, like me, just ordinary folks do to really be able to help make a difference in the world when it comes to your work, when it comes to human trafficking?
Mhm.
And again, we do have a lot of resources, y'all, in the write up. But I would just love to hear like a story of someone that you just thought, wow, that person just kind of rose and is now
Yes.
making a big difference.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I'm sure there's
I have so
millions.
many. I have so
Thousands.
many. I really do say this all the time, but the greatest honor that I have is to be able to work alongside the local nationals that we work with. They are remarkable. They are absolutely remarkable. I think one of my favorite stories is of our India field or country director. He was born in remote India as an orphan, and his story of rising up and recognizing
Mhm.
the issue with the sisters in his own country, and then the things that he overcomes and accomplishes day in and day out. I mean, his team will sometimes ride a train for 24 hours one way because they get word that one victim is still in a brothel and they have evidence of it. And so the sacrifices that they make are incredible. And I think he really, really inspires me, especially knowing where he comes from. You know, he didn't come from resources. He didn't come from a high level of education. He was just a very ordinary person that has played a hand in the rescue of thousands of Indian women and children. And one of the things that he told me in an interview I did with him one time was, you know, I said, do you get really discouraged because there's so, I mean, so many cases don't work out.
Yeah.
You're seeing the very worst of humanity. And he said, yes, but Laura, it was almost like he responded like that wasn't even a thought that he had, almost like he was surprised that I would ask that question, because he said, well, yes, but Laura, the light always wins and we have the light.
Wow.
And so, you know, I think people getting to play a small part in their work and pushing them forward is just such an honor. And it's inspiring beyond, you know, it's inspiring beyond words to me.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to take that with me today. So let's talk a little bit about, because I know from our conversations that the steady source of inspiration for you is so often the national leaders and those that are really doing the work on the ground for the Exodus Road. Can you kind of give us a little understanding of how those operatives work? What do they? Yeah, give us a taste of kind of the process of these operations.
Yeah. So the first thing that's really important to say out loud is that we always work in conjunction and under the partnership of local authorities. So we're not in countries doing our own thing. Our primary collaborative partner all around the world is local law enforcement and police. But essentially, you know, what we've learned over the years is that police are they're under resourced and they're understaffed, and they are typically really overwhelmed with the amount of cases that they could do every month and the ability they have to actually gather really quality evidence on those cases. And so what our teams do is they go and they essentially do the legwork for them. They conduct basic investigations and collect data that essentially creates for them a really great starting place for them to be able to walk forward with cases of human trafficking. So they're specifically looking for minors that are being sold, particularly for sex, anything that would fall within the legal framework of that country in human trafficking. Those are the cases that they're building. And then it works differently in different countries because of our partnerships and just how the systems work. But essentially, then we're able to supply them with evidence. And then in some cases, we actually support them on operations. In some cases, we're not allowed to do that. And we just give them the evidence and get, you know, follow-up reports after. So it depends, but essentially they're building, we call them target packages, but they're building all the casework so that a law enforcement partner can take that and then walk forward, rescue survivors and deliver them to whatever aftercare is in place in the country, and then arrest the offenders, the traffickers.
Wow. That must be so dangerous, and I can't even really wrap my brain around it. That's amazing work. And I too, the more I read from y'all about what they do, the more they deeply inspire me too. So I understand
Yeah,
where
there's
your
a
source
lot
of
of
inspiration.
risk. Yeah, I think there's so much risk. You know, I mean, there's the physical risk, but there's also just the emotional and mental and spiritual risk of just
Yes.
essentially it's this reality of coming face to face with really like the actual worst
Yep.
that humanity can do to each other. And they kind of live in this space of seeing and documenting that.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe perhaps that's why they're so inspiring, is because they rise above that and somehow also help see and become the best of humanity too at the same time. It's like this, they
Yeah.
see the worst, but then they become and kind of celebrate the best. And it's this
Wow.
beautiful, it's this, it's a beautiful thing, but it is dark and heavy and definitely there's a lot of risk involved.
Well, actually, I would love for you to speak a little bit to, those that are listening or watching, and to that point you just made of, the pain it causes to see what is happening when it comes to human trafficking in the world. It is dark. It is terrifying. It is, especially when you realize it's not just happening somewhere else, it's often happening in your own community. So, what would you say to those that uh, are have big love in their hearts and they want to do what they can, but it's just too scary or too overwhelming or too hard to think about learning about this or being a part of it because it's hard to watch, hard to
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, our operatives and my own husband, I mean, we have had to deal with the fallout of trauma
I'm sure.
um, and, and the effects of that have been great on our marriage and on our family and on his own, mental health. So that is definitely a burden. But I think one of the things that I keep coming back to is I actually had a pastor's wife tell me once. Um, I was Somebody was saying to somebody else, "Oh, like I can never deal with, or I can never handle what that person is handling." And she said, "Yeah, but you're not on the ride yet, and God gives you the ticket for the ride when you get on the ride." And I think that is just really true. I think sometimes we think we step way far back from the thing, the darkness or the adventure or the obedience or the next right thing that we're called to. And I
Mhm.
think it's true with even just the knowledge of human trafficking or understanding or being willing to even look into it. It's like we step so far back because we assume that we won't have what it takes to be able to handle that. And I think the beautiful thing is that I think you get what it takes as you step into it.
Wow.
You're right. You probably don't have what it takes because you're like 50 feet back from the thing. But if you'll have the courage to step forward and step closer and step
Mhm.
in, I think you're provided what you need with each step. But I think you're not provided what you need if you stand still. But as you move forward,
Mm.
you get what you need, and I think that it's really true. A lot of people don't. It's really horrible. I mean, it's a horrible injustice.
Yeah.
The exploitation, particularly of women and children,
Yeah.
particularly in the sex industry, sex trafficking world, is horrible. I mean, it's so dark. But
Yeah.
I think that darkness wins when we're not even willing to step into the knowledge of it. We're not even willing to step forward and look at it.
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, I think that would be the encouragement that I would give to people who don't feel like they have what it takes to handle it. Having said that, obviously you know yourself and you know what triggers you have. And I think there are some people that can watch all the covert footage, and there are some people that don't need to watch all the covert footage. They just
Yeah.
need to step into a different, their step is different, and that's
Yeah.
okay, and there's freedom in that. But I think to just not engage at all um, is not the brave, courageous thing to do.
Right. Thank you for that.
Mm.
Love that. Love that. Well, let's talk for a moment about just you personally, how you, as a mom, your kids are
Mhm.
teenagers now, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Um, and in your marriage, as you mentioned, and just the everydayness of life. Your kids are just starting to go back to school right around now from being out of school and out a year. And there's like real life stuff going on in the midst of this incredibly epic, um, important work. So how do you fuel your body, your mind, your spirit so that you're able to keep going after a decade and also, do all the things that you need to do in your everyday life?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's been a journey. Definitely, I did not do self care or balance well in the beginning for sure. And I really think it's only in the last like 2 years that I've really learned what it means to come away from this false idea that it rests on my shoulders,
Right.
and that the tighter I am actually means the better I am and the better work I've done. And actually, the opposite of that is really true, right? It's when I'm rested and full that actually I'm doing the better work, not just when I'm exhausted and running from one thing to another. But I have not done that well at all in my life. As I've juggled like full-time career and full-time mom, we live away from all of our family. So we kind of have to do everything ourselves, and then we have travel too. I travel and then my husband Matt travels. So he can be gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And so then that adds a whole other layer of struggle. But I think, I have learned that having moments to myself before the day starts is really critical for my mental health. And I think even in the last year, I've started meeting with a spiritual director, and that's been really helpful. It's been really valuable just to take time to really pay attention to my soul and how my soul is doing in the midst of this work. And so I feel like I'm learning a lot there. Definitely, again, I'm not super consistent in this, but I find that when I exercise, when I can get outside, when I can get in nature, when I can take the time to walk the dogs, when I can get on a hike, that there's something so healing about that. And so I try to do that as often as I can. And then another practice that I've been able to do this past year is on my way to work. It's so tempting to be in the car and I have, 10 minutes. And again, I'm not 100% consistent in this, but I try to not not listen to things. I try to have that as kind of a silence moment as I head into the day to kind of center myself and quiet my heart and listen and pay attention. And one of the things I do is there's this prayer called the welcoming prayer from Thomas Keating. And the beginning of it, it just says, welcome, welcome, welcome. I welcome everything that comes to me today I welcome everything that comes to me today because I know it is for my healing. And there's more to the prayer, but I think that really sets my mind and my intention for the day. Just that, hey, anything that happens to me today, anything that comes across my desk, any conversation I have, there's a gift in that for me. There's something I'm supposed to be paying attention to. And so it makes the things that come at me, whether it's a kid or a problem or a conversation, it makes that feel like a gift and not just a obstacle or a distraction or a hassle. And so that's really been helpful to change my perspective too.
That is amazing. I love that. Well, let's do this. I love to just have a moment as a community, Laura and I together, and those of you that are watching our live and on the replay, to just kind of loop up and take a moment and practice just taking a moment to pause. So that there is the healing, so that there is the sense of peace and able to ground ourselves and fill up our cups for whatever the heck the day has ahead. So I would love if you would, Laura, to repeat the welcome piece, and then I'm going to read an excerpt from one of my books. And for those that this is brand new to, this is only going to last a minute, so don't freak out. Keep watching. And I believe that this might be the biggest gift for you in this whole conversation, is to just have a moment of silence, of quiet, to tend to your own sense of being. So wherever you are, we invite you to just take a deep breath. And if you're not driving, maybe close your eyes. And Laura, if you'll say the start of the welcome prayer again to kick us off, that would be great.
Yeah. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I welcome everything that comes to me today because I know it is for my healing.
So be still, surrender. Yes, pause here. Especially pause here in these moments following a story with elements of great pain and injustice, because there is hope. And here there is peace. There is a chance, a place, a way to be free of any burden to carry, to worry, to do anything other than be. So be, breathe, exhale, and let go. So, for those that, like Laura was saying in her own story, it'd been a lot of years where there was a lack of the pause, a lack of the filling up of the cup. Please just kind of let yourself allow your imagination to be fueled by Laura's story and by, we hope, an experience where you took a breath, welcomed whatever beauty or messes are around you right now, and see if there might be a time of day you could, for 1 minute, set the timer, 2 minutes, and just be and breathe and see what healing. I love that healing is the first part of that welcoming prayer, because in the world today, there is a lot that is broken and in need of healing. So before we wrap up, I do want to take a moment, and with this kind of, in this conversation around soul and kind of hope and healing, would you talk a little bit, Laura, of so no matter where a person lives in the world, their lives, perhaps their work, perhaps their children, have been impacted by this COVID, the pandemic. So I would love for you to share one thing that's been, hard, we'll call it a thorn in the work of the Exodus Road, and then one gift that has come to the Exodus Road directly from this COVID, the pandemic, and also personally, if you'd speak to that, also like a gift and a challenge, just so we can all feel like those of us that are challenged, we're not alone. And those of us that are having a hard time finding the gifts, to perhaps be inspired by some of the gifts that you have found in your life. So personally and in the Exodus Road, a thorn in a rose, or a gift and a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, COVID has been such a unique thing, hasn't it? I mean, like, I just feel like it has affected all of us. And it's been this kind of universal trial, I think, that the whole world has gone through. And I think, organizationally, it's been really difficult because all of our frontline work and investigations has had to shut down. Everyone back in March had to go quarantine themselves. We've had investigators and frontline staff and staff here get sick. And so we're definitely not unscathed to any of that. I think, though, the gift of it organizationally has been that we've been able to pivot, and it's forced us to innovate in new ways and to just think a little bit more outside of the box. And I think that's actually been a pretty significant gift, because everyone was grounded. We had more time to work on relational partnerships with some people and some organizations that probably, in the space of the machine running forward, we wouldn't have had time to really develop and invest in. And so that's been a real gift. And out of that, we're seeing the fruit of that in new projects that are coming on the radar that we're excited about doing, that we probably wouldn't have even known about had we not had the time at home with our computers to continue to do work, but in a different way. So I think that's been a really significant gift, despite the challenge of it and the frustration and the isolation of it. And I think personally, we have 3 kids, and I think the challenge has gotten harder and harder as we've moved forward, right? Because at the beginning, it was like, oh, we can do this, no problem. And then as the year, as the years, not years, but as the months go by,
Feels like yours.
I know everyone is more annoyed with each other, and we literally have watched everything that there can be watched on
Right.
all the TV shows. So I think that has been a real struggle, just as a mom trying to navigate their hearts in that. And I have a senior and one kid that was starting his freshman year in high school, and all the loss of that has been really disappointing. And I think there was I think too, it's the fatigue of being disappointed over and over again and navigating that with my own self, but then also just
Mm,
as a mom with their hearts, to where I think I hear my kids say, blah, blah, blah is happening. And their response has become, oh yeah, but it probably won't happen. And just that cynical kind of response, because so much has been taken away and changed on them. So I think that has been really hard to navigate as a mom. Um, that's been a challenge or a thorn.
yeah, yeah.
But I think the flip side of that is the gift of it is that we have had so much time together as a family.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I feel closer relationally with my kids and with my husband now than I did a year ago. And I know that that's a real gift too. I had someone tell us once when we were talking about parenting, we were like, is quality time more important or quantity of time more important? And their answer was like, both, of course, both. And
Mm,
I think a lot of times I can tend towards really valuing the quality of time, like the really special individual dates or the special
yeah.
trips. And I can miss that actually it's just important, like the quantity of time
Yeah.
with your kids is also important. And so COVID has definitely given us a lot of quantity, um, which has been which has been good too.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
can connect with much of that. So for those that are watching, Laura and I would love, as we almost wrap up this conversation, we would love to invite you to really, in this moment, kind of pour your imagination back over this conversation and notice what captured your attention, something brand new, something maybe that has been dormant that just now just kind of came back up into your understanding, and what is drawing you in. And I would strongly invite you to find one step. I call it a step of inspired action, something that comes from inspiration, something that comes from your unique whatever rose up in you, and just practice like seeing what happens. As Laura said, sometimes um, being further away from whatever it is that you're drawn to is actually more uncomfortable than getting closer. So
Mhm.
just draw near to whatever it is that you're beckoned to do more, to think about more, to be aware of more. And the reason that I invite the steps of inspired action is that's just how we make our way and kind of learn like, oh, I do want to do more of this, or this really does fill up my cup. This really does fill me with inspiration. It does get me excited. And that's all connected to our purpose on the planet, our calling, and all the stuff. It's feel good stuff. That's the why of this. Um, and as part of that, I really humbly invite you to consider, for those of you that are watching this during the month of May, whether live or on the replay, we are doing a fundraising partnership where Seeds of Exchange is partnering with the Exodus Road to raise $4,000 for the 1 year of a social care worker's salary, travel expenses, and Laura's going to talk a little bit about the why of that. And if you're watching this after the month of May, go into the write up and know that there are going to be the Exodus Road this is the long term. They're in this for a long time. So there will be more ways that you can be a part if you have funds to give
Mhm.
after the month of May. But if it's in May, check out the link below and please give whatever you can. And the power of a bunch of people giving little amounts is extraordinary. And if you have a big amount to give that too, and we'll celebrate all of it. So, Laura, will you talk a little bit about why this fundraiser is so important and what the impact will be.
Yeah, it's critical. The actual moment of a operation is actually, you think in your mind that it's this like glorious thing, but it's actually can be pretty chaotic, pretty stressful, pretty traumatic for everyone involved. They're police, and there's just a lot of things going on. And so what often happens is that the actual survivors, especially if they're younger, and particularly we see this in India, if they oftentimes get kind of lost in the mix of that. And so what we do is we have a social worker, crisis care worker that's a female that goes not on every single operation, but on most operations. And her job is just to hone in and care and give comfort and encouragement and meet the immediate needs for those that are rescued, for the survivors. And they can be 11 or 12 years old. They could be 27 years old, but they're all human trafficking victims. And so this fundraiser will cover the expense for one of these local Indian national women to give that kind of immediate crisis care to the survivors for an entire year, which is just really significant. And it's a really important component in just giving love and light and protection and safety in an environment already with survivors that is incredibly chaotic and stressful. To have this one female that is there as this kind of mother hen. One of my favorite pictures of one of these women that works in India is we have a picture of her at a police station, and she just has her arms around these three little preteen young teen girls. And that's really the picture of what you're providing with this salary.
Wow. Still can't get over preteen. That just brings tears to my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And we're so grateful to all of the Exodus Road folks that are on the ground, and my heart and prayers are going to be very much with and for them, because that work is incredible and so intense. So before we wrap up, I've got to wipe the tears out of my eyes. Laura, will you share one last story, just something that comes to mind that you'd love to leave us all with before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think one of the things with human trafficking that is that it feels so daunting. It feels so big, and like Sarah was saying, it just feels like, oh, how do I even step forward into this? And I think my encouragement would be similar to you all, would be similar to a conversation that I had with a woman named Karen Eubank. And if you know anything about Myanmar, Burma, you should totally check out Free Burma Rangers. It's an organization that's there doing incredible work. And she is the wife of the founder. And so she raised her kids in war-torn areas, and it's just this incredible woman of faith. And I got the opportunity to meet her when we first moved to Thailand. I was a young 30-year-old mom of three little kids, and was just kind of overwhelmed already, and knew I hadn't even hardly stepped into it too much. And I asked her, I said, Karen, how do you handle this life? And the specific question I said was, what's one piece of advice you would give me? And she said, well, let me tell you. She said, when we first moved here, I was so overwhelmed by all the needs around me. I felt paralyzed because I never felt like I was enough. I never felt like I was meeting the needs. And she said, but then and she's a woman of faith. And she said, then I prayed, and I felt like God said, Karen, just do one thing. And after you get this one thing down and obey in this way, then I'll give you the next thing. And she said, okay. And so what was the thing? And she said, the thing was just love the person right in front of you. And she said, so Laura, I started doing that. If I was sitting with a Burmese grandmother next to a fire and I couldn't speak her language, I just tried to be fully present and love the person right in front of me. And if I was trying to homeschool my kid and we were having a hard time with math, I just tried to love him right in front of me. And if, whatever it was, I just tried to be fully present and intentional with where I was right then.
Wow.
And then she said, and Laura, I haven't gotten my next thing from God yet. So just this idea that just being fully present in whatever your life or you're being stirred to step into, being fully present to that just feels like such a beautiful encouragement. And I think it helps to not become overwhelmed, because I think especially with human trafficking, you think, well, I don't have the answer, so I can't even step in.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, hey, right where you are, who are the vulnerable? What's the next step of learning, education, action, generosity? What is it that you're supposed to do? And what does it look like just to bring your full self into that?
Yeah.
And trust that that's enough and actually just what it should be.
Okay.
That's what I would leave with.
The thing I have to tend to, and I just got a note that my computer's about to die. I thought I had hang on. So, speaking of tending to urgent things and being low on energy. Okay. Forgive me, y'all. That is going to be the word that we all carry with us until the day.
I love that.
Can you say it one more time? Tend to.
Yeah. Love. Yeah. Love. Yeah. Love the person right in front of you.
Love the person right in front of you. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Laura, thank you for sharing your story, for the work that you do, for doing it in the way that you do it, and for giving us the honor of being a part of your story. And may our stories keep intertwining.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for this has been a gift.
Oh, well, thank you. And thanks to your community for giving me some time to share. I feel honored and engaged.
Yes. So y'all, thank you for being a part of this conversation. Laura and I, our hearts are with you. And I just want to remind you that you're loved, that you belong, that we belong to each other. So let's stand tall together and light up the world. Bye, guys. Much love.